Yup, what's going on, y'all? Rhythm Heaven Groove was announced during last year's big March Nintendo Direct. Since then, they've pretty much gone radio silent, until now. Via the Nintendo Today app and their Twitter account, Nintendo dropped info about the game, including its release date, which will be July 2nd. With this announcement came a short gameplay snippet, some screenshots, and the game's box art. The last Rhythm Heaven game, Rhythm Heaven Megamix, came out about a decade ago, meaning fans have been waiting a long time for this follow-up. With that in mind, many are probably wondering what they can expect from this new entry. Each game in the past has shared some elements, but also had aspects that stood out from the rest. Although Nintendo hasn't shared much about Rhythm Heaven Groove, there's a surprising amount of info we can gather from what's already been shared. So, I decided to break it down to the best of my ability. In that process, I actually figured out something pretty cool. But, before getting into more, if you've been enjoying my videos, go ahead and leave a like, subscribe if you want to see more, and leave a comment. If you're a longtime Rhythm Heaven fan and enjoy this video, go ahead and drop some knowledge as well to help out those newcomers. There's a ton to go over here, so I'm bound to miss something. If I do, feel free to let me know in the comments. Alright, so getting into the game structure, Rhythm Heaven games are generally broken down into bite-sized minigames that are laid out in groups of either 4 or 5 that culminate in a remix that combines the games into one final test. I'll get into remixes more later in the video. The last time around, Megamix changed up this formula and included a story mode that had you proceeding through minigames as usual, but with story beats and dialogue thrown in between each game. The story was charming, but on repeated playthroughs, it really slowed things down, and thus, a lot of fans didn't really look forward to grinding through it whenever they wanted to start a new save. From what Nintendo has shared about the game, we can safely assume that Groove will forego this story mode and instead go back to the basics, focusing only on the minigames. They even went out of their way to mention that there's no epic story in this game's reveal trailer. There does seem to be one main character that'll be guiding the player, but much like the samurai drummer from the first game, or the Frogettes band leader from the second game, they'll most likely be present for the beginning and the end of the game, with some cameos thrown in throughout the minigames or the side games. With regards to basic progression, based on the sounds heard at the end of the first trailer, it appears that the series' grading system will be returning. Upon completion of each game, it's possible for the player to receive one of the following rankings: Try Again, OK, and Superb. Each ranking has its own sound effect and accompanying music, which is all pretty par for the course for this series. Each player is able to move forward to other minigames after receiving a ranking of OK or higher, but if they're hit with a Try Again ranking, they must retry the minigame and do better to pass. After a few tries, there's a way to skip a minigame that's giving you trouble via the endgame cafe. When the player earns a Superb ranking, they're rewarded with a medal that can then be used to unlock rhythm toys, endless games, and other side modes, which we can all assume will be back in Groove. Megamix introduced a currency system to the series, which resulted in the player being rewarded with coins. The better they performed, the more coins they won. Since the story mode may be dialed back this time around, it's tough to say whether or not this will be included in Groove. In the end, I expect that Rhythm Heaven Groove will be a more back-to-the-basics approach to developing a Rhythm Heaven game, as opposed to being more of a celebration of the series like Megamix was, meaning most of the features from the first 3 games will carry over to Groove. Now that Nintendo has shared the game's box art, we can actually see a lot of returning characters from past Rhythm Heaven games. Or at least they resemble returning characters, but let's get into it so you can see what I mean. All of the characters on the left side of the box artwork seem to be new to the series. The green birds here seem to be a similar shade of green when compared to the Hue Birds of Happiness from the Flockstep minigame, but they lack the distinct features that those birds had, so they're probably unrelated. There's a small dog in the grass who's also shown running with the guide character in the initial trailer. One might think that this is the barista dog that helps you out in most of the other games, but it's missing that character's iconic headphones and black tail, so this is probably a brand new character. Right next to them is a returning character, one of the blue space dancers from the original game on Game Boy Advance. These characters also appear as paddlers in Rhythm Heaven on the DS, but wear shorts and socks in those appearances, which means they're most likely not going to be paddling this time around. The character next to them resembles the Cosmo Dancers, which are an alternate version of the Space Dancers minigame series, but there are enough differences between them and the Cosmo Dancers design that leads me to believe that this is a brand new character. After those guys, we have the white and blue samurai that's shown on the box. At a glance, they share some similarities with the series' iconic wandering samurai. Upon closer inspection, there are actually some major differences that lead me to believe that this character is also new to the series. The wandering samurai's hairstyle closely resembles the traditional samurai chonmage hairstyle, having a shaved spot with a top knot. This new samurai has a full head of hair with a ponytail and blue skin, which the wandering samurai has never been depicted with in his many appearances. Could this be a new generation of samurai taking up the mantle? I guess we'll have to wait and see. The next character bears a striking resemblance to the researcher from the Sick Beats minigame, also known as Dr. Virus. Their back is only ever shown in gameplay, but in Megamix, the character was shown to be wearing a yellow tie in their key art. Much like the samurai, this could be a new generation of the character, or even a younger version of them from the past. Next up, we have one of the hairy onions from the Rhythm Tweezers minigame. This art looks almost identical to the art shown in Megamix, so there's not really much new to talk about here. And finally, all the way to the right, we have what appears to be an updated version of the pop singer who appears in Fan Club from the Rhythm Heaven DS game. She's had many different appearances throughout the games and various comics that were tied to the series, but always has her iconic microphone on hand. This time around, they gave her a fancier outfit and some new accessories. Alright, so to recap, that's 5 characters who are returning or strongly resemble past characters. The rest of the characters here seem to be brand new, meaning we'll have a ton of new minigames to look forward to. They all match the spirit of the series pretty well, so I'm sure they'll all fit right in with these returning games. But on that same note, how many minigames should we expect to see? Now, we're entering big prediction territory. This topic is a bit harder to predict because the series tends to have characters that team up in unexpected ways. This means that just because 2 characters have different styles or design characteristics, it doesn't mean that they'll have to be from different minigames. We can get a rough idea of the minimum number of minigames we'll see in Groove between the artwork and the gameplay that's already been shown off. Right off the bat, we were shown one minigame with round characters jumping through hoops, which seems to be this game's tutorial and or first minigame. After that, we were shown a montage that revealed 6 other minigames, a majority of which also have their respective characters shown off in the game's box art. For the viewers at home, that means we're at 7 new minigames. I'll keep the count on screen to make things easier. Circling back to the box art, we can continue counting. I'll just go ahead and count every unique character that's doing its own thing as a potential minigame, and highlight any deviations from this theory. Starting in the top left, we have this alien ship, then the 3 green birds I mentioned before, this person and a dog with a soccer ball, this blue character. They seem weird enough that I'll count them on their own, although they're missing a distinct character feature, which leads me to suspect that they're part of the soccer crew, but for the sake of this argument, I'll count them anyway. We can go ahead and skip the jump roper, orange bottle, and goose since they were shown off in the trailer. Up next, we have this group of adventurers and a frog. They seem to be a parent and child duo, so we'll count them together. The small dog and nesting Maneki Neko toy were also shown in the trailer, so I'm not counting those. After that, we have this child with a book. I didn't mention this in the earlier section because it may be a stretch, but I figured I'd mention it here. This could be a younger version of one of the cheerleaders from the Rhythm Heaven Fever minigame, but the book is the only correlation. If I had to guess, I'd say this is a brand new character. Moving on, we have this umbrella character, and then we have this purple character with the screen. The red fiddler crab on the bottom can most likely be counted on its own as well. Thinking back to Rhythm Heaven Fever, The crew of shrimps from Shrimp Shuffle were shown to be their actual size in universe. This could be a callback to that and the fact that this series is no stranger to small critters being part of the main cast. Up next, we have a character in sports gear holding a racket. Due to its shape and size, I'd wager that this is a badminton racket. Could this character be related to Rhythm Heaven Fever's Air Rally minigame? Probably not, but it's cool to think about. Up next, we have a weird-faced moon, which looks pretty normal compared to the Majora's Mask moon, I guess. Then there's a bird playing a ukulele. This character appears in a game that involves bouncing fruit off of another character's muscles. Although this game wasn't in the trailers, a screenshot for it is shown off on the eShop webpage for this game. Then we have a huge golem and a character with blue hair and a bow tie. Up next we have what seems to be a sentient red car, and on top of it is the can smashing character from the trailer. Then lastly we have a big orange simply drawn dinosaur. And with that we can count 23 potential new games. Adding 5 returning characters that were earlier discussed, that takes us to 28 minigames to start with. Obviously, this doesn't include anything not shown in the trailers or art. Now, Megamix and Fever tended to have 4 minigames in a group with 1 remix to close out the group. I mentioned remixes earlier, but let's get into more detail here. Remixes are minigames that take the prior 4 minigames in a group and combine them into a unique song and scenario for the player to overcome with no practice. These remixes are kind of like the boss fights, and they end up being some of the most memorable parts of each collection. They come with unique remix visuals for each game, and sometimes even vocal tracks. If we can expect the same formula for Groove, that means these 28 games we've counted can be split up into 7 groups, each with their own remix for a total of 7 remixes. This bumps us up from 28 games to 35, meaning we can expect a minimum of around 35 games in Rhythm Heaven Groove. Looking back to Fever, that game had 7 groups and 7 remixes for its base set of minigames as well. Keeping up with series tradition, Fever also had 3 sets of sequel minigames, which were harder follow-up versions of 12 or so of the minigames the player saw earlier. These sets also had their own remixes that had the potential to throw in any game from the collection, which posed some of the greatest challenges the game had to offer. These 3 sets of 4, plus 3 remixes, rounded out Fever's game list to 50. I feel that using Fever as a reference for Groove makes sense because it was the last Rhythm Heaven game on a home console and not exclusively on a handheld. Knowing this, it gives us a pretty good perspective on what to expect from Groove's scope. Since we've been able to count off 7 groups of 4 distinct games, we may potentially already know all of the base minigames that'll be in Rhythm Heaven Groove, which is way more than I expected to figure out before making this video. After putting together all those numbers, we're looking at a collection that could round out at around 50 minigames. I feel pretty confident that even if my character counting was off, there may be some unrevealed minigames that more or less keep this count consistent. Obviously, this doesn't include endless games, rhythm toys, or 2-player modes, so the amount of content that'll be in this game may actually be pretty substantial. So yeah, there you have it. That's pretty much what we should expect to see from Rhythm Heaven Groove this summer. As a die-hard Rhythm Heaven fan, this was a fun exercise to conduct and really just makes me even more excited for the game. I didn't even mention the game's price, but yeah, it's only $40, which is a steal for a first-party Nintendo game. Back when Fever came out in the US, it was also released at a budget price, so it's nice to see that things haven't changed that much since then. The other entries in the series are great too, but I anticipate Fever will match Groove the most in terms of game feel and what you'll be getting into. If you're interested in the series, I highly recommend you find yourself a copy of Rhythm Heaven Fever to rent or own and give it a try to see what you're getting into. There's also a recent indie game called Bits and Bops, which is only on Steam right now but may be coming to consoles later. I highly recommend Rhythm Heaven fans check this game out. The artwork, the music, the attention to detail, it all lives up to the spirit of the Rhythm Heaven series and is something you shouldn't miss. Huge shout out to that team. The game took me by surprise last year and deserves all the recognition it can get. Earlier this year, I made a video about the Rhythm Fighter side mode in Fever. Here's a link if you want to check that out. I didn't talk about two-player modes much, but I'm really hoping there's a similar mode included in Groove. Having something like this on the go and more accessible to the masses would be a dream come true. At the time of recording this, we didn't get a Nintendo Direct for the season, but either way, I'm eagerly awaiting more info to drop as we approach the game's release date on July 2nd. But as always, until then, thank you for watching. If you like this video, leave a like. If you want to subscribe, go ahead and do that. And I'll see you some other time. Peace.